We are just, and there he is, my friend, the Honourable E.J. Saunders. Well, you were there briefly. Um, EJ, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Same here. It's good to see you.
And you're in some elegant surroundings there. That looks just about right for a deputy premier.
This is not my office, by the way. This is not my home either. Some good friends of mine are at they are a good friend of mine is the general manager of a resort. It's called the Somerset Resort in on Grace Bay. So actually a beautiful resort, and they allowed me to use one of their penthouses for this interview.
You know, EJ, what I like about you, you're so honest. You could have just said, "Yeah, this is my second home" or something like that. But you're very honest. That's what I love about you. It's
Thank you.
indeed a great honor that you could spare some time with us today and join us at CANTO for this fireside chat. In line with our theme, the new digital reality 2021 and beyond. You know, I might call you EJ sometimes, and I
You can
apologize.
call me EJ anytime. Anytime you can call me EJ.
You know, many governments are grappling with the challenge of how to enable the transition to the new digital economy, particularly during the pandemic. It's been an amazing year for you, particularly when you were elected in February and made deputy premier. How have you adjusted to being deputy premier of Turks and Caicos Islands?
Well, I mean, it's like baptism by fire now. First of all, let me say that deputy premier in itself doesn't bring much in itself as being the deputy premier in the position of deputy premier. It gives me a little bit of benefits when the premier is out of country, and the premier left country once, I think, for 3 days, and so I was acting premier at that point. And the only thing that changed was that all of a sudden his security became my security, and they had me under wraps for 24/7 for 3 days. So I hated it. It didn't give me a lot of freedom. But outside of that, my main position is that I'm deputy. I'm not deputy. I'm the Minister of Health and Human Services. So from day one, we've been moving very quickly. We got elected on the 20th of February. The Premier and myself got sworn in on that same day. And I was made Minister of Health on the 3 days afterwards. And so because of the COVID pandemic, we've been facing a lot of challenges since then. And so we've been running since the 20th of February. So in some sense, it was a bit of a transition because I think government moves fast in some ways where you're constantly in meetings. I ran from cabinet to come to do this interview. And then other times it slows right down, particularly when you want to implement things. But it's been, the Ministry of Health is a very good team. And if you see by our numbers and our vaccination rates, we're doing very well. And that's because I was probably given the best team in government. And I'm happy to be working. And they've made my transition very easy. Thank you.
So, because I was wondering about that, because I know, you know, for a good time of your previous career, you've been in telecoms. You've also been in fintech as well. But how have you made that adjustment from telecoms to health minister during the pandemic? How's that been?
Well, it's been. I don't want to say it's been easy because I've had a very good team. And the day I was made Minister of Health, someone from PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, called me up and he said, "Minister, I'm going to give you some advice. Say the first thing not to do is don't resign, like a number of other ministers of health around the region." And he said, as long as you stick with it and then listen to your team, and if I wanted to reach out to him, I could reach out to him. But the truth of the matter is that the COVID pandemic has been driving mainly the Ministry of Health initiatives around the world. And so that consumes about 90% of your time as minister. And for me, my first thing was to treat that as a project. as any other project. It's no different from building a brand new network or rolling out into a brand new country, building a greenfield network, which we've done in my previous job numerous times. So once you start to treat that as a project, then you start to say, who are the experts that I have on my team? Who build the towers? Who build out the network itself? Who is putting in the switch? Who's dealing with building? Who's dealing with customer service? Who's dealing with the retail stores? And so if you treat COVID like that, you say, who are my epidemiologists? Who are my surge people who are inside the hospitals? Who's dealing with oxygen? Who's dealing with contract tracing? And all of those things. So when you start to break that down into projects, it's no different from any other project. So then it comes down to asking the right questions and pushing the team in the right direction. And so far, so good. I said, I got a very good permanent secretary, PS Desiree Lewis. I've got a very good chief medical officer, Dr. Nadia Aswad, and the whole team has been very, 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 very good. So it was just a matter of me pushing them in the right directions and asking the right questions, and then taking the heat in front of the camera. So far, it's been very good. Today, we've got 67% fully vaccinated, 71% at least with one jab. Even though our cases starting to rise a little bit, we're at 23 right now. It was down to 0 in early July. And so we've been proactively managing the disease, and the results have been pretty good.
That's really impressive, EJ. I was just about to ask you actually what your vaccination rates. 67%. You're getting close to herd immunity then, maybe. And
well, we were trying to get to 80%, but we're going to fully open up the economy at 70%. But the economy is practically open. In early July, we took a lot of restrictions off. So business curfew starts at midnight, and you have to be at 1 a.m. to be home. Yes. That's the last remaining thing. And then we've got kind of a lax rules around face mask wearing, but we're doing pretty well, and we found the right balance because a lot of tourists are coming into the Turks and Caicos now. So we think we found the right balance between restrictions and being open at the right time. So a lot of people are coming in, but we still have some restrictions in place to ensure that our numbers are manageable.
No, well, I find that really impressive. I know Cayman has some very good figures, and Bermuda, but I think 67% from Turks and Caicos Islands is pretty impressive. Where I am, it's about 38% fully vaccinated. And I think, it varies from the island to island, but 67% very impressive. And by the way, did you say earlier that you just left cabinet to come and join us?
I just left cabinet. Yeah, it's still going on. And so I had to leave cabinet at the latter part of the day and said to the governor and the premier, thank you very much, but my CANTO friends need me, and I will see you at the next cabinet meeting.
Well, we'll try and remember that next time that you have cabinet on a Thursday. And
well, it's usually on Wednesdays, but this week we changed some things around this week, and they moved it to Thursday. But it's not a problem. I mean, they know that CANTO is important to me. They send their best wishes, and so that's fine. So
in your short life as a deputy premier and health minister, I've noticed just reading one or two articles that on the 12th of May, following a ministry reshuffle. Now, you've only been in government for a few months, but you've had a reshuffle. You were tasked with transforming the TCI government from a paper-based services to e-government, with nearly all of the essential services accessible online. So how have you adapted to now looking after the digital ministry, and how's that transformation going, and what's your timelines to try and complete?
Well, just a little bit of correction there. What happened is that we didn't have a ministerial reshuffle. The government financial year starts at 1st of April, and so when we were campaigning, we had how we wanted to form and the structure of government. And because when we came in, the structure of, and you'd see that at one point it says the Ministry of Health, Agriculture, Sports, and Human Services. And so some of those ministries were under, some of those departments were under different ministries in our manifesto on how we want to structure it. but we came in on the 20th
Oh,
of February. And so
right.
the government said, the deputy governor who's in charge of the civil servants, and those said, leave that structure in place until April, because otherwise it would mean changing the coding around for the financial part of it in terms of booking costs to different departments. So they want us to leave it in place. Now, I haven't taken up my new portfolio yet. My new portfolio is actually Minister of Finance, and the computer unit
Wow.
falls under finance. So I haven't taken it up. So it wasn't a ministerial reshuffle. What happened is that I was originally was always was going to be Minister of Finance, and that's what I was going to be from day one. But in order to do that, we needed an eighth ministry, because our premier will not take a ministry, well, at least not take departments. So he'll be premier, but without a portfolio, very similar to what they're doing in the Bahamas. So in order
Okay.
to do that, we needed an eighth ministry, because we only have 7 ministers. And that eighth ministry wasn't approved, had to be approved in the Privy Council in the United Kingdom. And that eighth ministry was approved yesterday in the UK time. And so next week we will then have that transition where I transition out of Ministry of Health and then move into it, become the Minister of Finance, and then the computer department falls under finance, and that's where all the e-government initiative comes in, and then I'll be able to run with the e-government initiatives. But my time frame, we are going to do a lot of projects, a lot of those projects simultaneously. I've
Yes.
told the premier not to expect anything tangible for about 18 months, even though he wants it, right away within 3 months. We'll
Yeah.
start to do some things, but we want to build in a lot of layers, particularly the security layer, before we start rolling out a number of other, maybe before it becomes customer facing, before the public be able to interact with a lot of the projects that we're rolling out. And so, but you'll see some things this year, but it's going to be a project that's going to be so huge, it's going to take up our full term. And then probably go into a second term. So it's going to be a multi-million-dollar, multi-year initiative.
Excellent. Now, I wish you all the best with that, and you're the man for that. It sounds very good.
Thank you.
Just now you've been for a little while on both sides of the fence. You used to be on telecoms. Now you're on government, so to speak. What's your perspective? What do you think about governments around the region trying to do their best to assist network operators? I know you're not involved in the telecoms as telecoms minister, but what's your assessment of that? How can government, and what I'm getting at is, how can governments really help network operators? What can they do? What do you see?
Well, the thing about it is that there's lots of changes happened since I was CEO of a telco operator. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the profits, the revenues have been moved to what people will call over-the-top operators. So Facebook and with WhatsApp and the like are making a lot of the money off of out of the telco space. And the telco operators are carrying a huge amount of capex to build out the networks to ensure that you can get data plans. But it's the other guys who are not building it who are making the money. And so margins have been squeezed. And as you started seeing, that a lot of operators around at first started trying to push the over-the-top players out of the markets, and that didn't work out. And now they're trying to embrace them, but trying to make their businesses profitable on much slimmer margins, particularly purely on data plans. And so I think governments need to recognize that operators aren't the cash cows they probably used to be, and keep that in mind. I would say try to work with them, particularly on driving down their costs, because it requires huge investment. I know in the Turks and Caicos, LTE was rolled out in about 2016, 2017, LTE probably came into the Turks and Caicos, and that's would be 4G. We're already talking about 5G. So before, in less than 10 years, we were gonna go from, or in about 10 years, we were gonna go from what was 2.5G to 3G, 4G, and 5G. And that's a huge amount of investment. And Turks and Caicos is small. So imagine over bigger countries in the Caribbean, but even globally. And so it's a huge amount of capex that our operators have to pay. And so I would think that particularly in that, the government should make it easier for them to get the spectrum, price the spectrum in a manner where you're not trying to extract a huge amount of money from the operators. In the past, governments were doing that, thinking that, wow, 4G is going to be a big thing. Let's push the cost of the spectrum up. I would take the opposite view now that I'm in government, that, hey, don't try to make a killing off the operators, because you're going to need the operators to build out the network and provide the best services, and see this as a long-term partnerships. So my thing would be work with the operators, particularly now as partners and the sector, and not just as seeing it as a cash cow.
Right, indeed. You were at Cabinet today, so you would have missed the action-packed agenda that we had in today's session. And one of
Would you believe I'm in a CANTO WhatsApp groups? I've been following it also.
Good stuff.
And Leon has kept me up to date. Leon Williams.
Actually, speaking of Leon, do you remember something I want to share with the audience is that you're such a good campaign manager. Do you remember when I was running to be chair of CANTO, you were my wingman and my campaign manager, and I put it down to you going around talking to everybody, trying to convince them that somehow I need to be chair. So just a little aside there. But
well, Julian, maybe I think I probably got bad at campaigning, because I remember that when you won that, it was in Suriname, and you just won that slightly. Just 1 or 2 votes. But in the Turks and Caicos, we won 14 out of the 15 seats, so we won all but 1 seat. So we won 14 seats, and the other side won 1. So it appears I've gotten a little bit bad at campaigning, but yes, it's certainly good.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Yeah. So one of the things we were looking at this morning was looking at strategies for regulating big tech in the Caribbean. And, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, it's a challenging subject, but do you think that there might be some way that governments could be? Is this something the Turks and Caicos might want to look at in the future, do you think?
When you say big tech, I'm assuming you're talking about the cloud players now.
I'm talking about, Facebook, Google, all those, the big tech guys that really have not been regulated.
So when I think of big tech, I think of particularly the cloud providers, Google, Amazon, and those players. And then that's more on the business side of things, and then you've got the consumer side where you have the Googles and then the Facebook side of things. It's, to be honest, it's very difficult to try to regulate Facebook from a consumer point of view, because Facebook product, the main Facebook product, trying to regulate that is going to be very, very tough. You would I think you would need to you'd have to roll out something very similar to like the Great Wall of China to be able to not regulate, but be able to technically limit what people can and can't access. And if you do that, I think the public will go crazy. And so trying to tell, and I don't even know if we have the might to even be able to tell Facebook and those what to do. I would take a different approach. And the reason why is that what you're starting to see now is that you're starting to see services that you're getting if you're a North American resident that you're not getting in the Caribbean. I spoke about this when I spoke at a conference in Trinidad many years ago. Take, for instance, Netflix. The Netflix catalog for the Caribbean is minuscule and terrible compared to the catalog of their content in the United States. If you're a United States Netflix subscriber, your catalog is huge, you get great options and choices you don't have in the Caribbean. And I would try to work with them to try to get them to offer the exact same services that they're offering in the United States and in Europe having them offered in the Caribbean, because I think it comes down to quality of life issues. Like now, Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and everything is becoming a utility. Before it was a nice to have, now it's a utility. If you can't get access to your WhatsApp content, it's a very limiting factor. I mean, for you to get through your day. The WhatsApp application is probably more important to you than your phone. And I'm saying that it runs on your phone, so the phone becomes important. But I mean, compared to everything else on your phone, your WhatsApp application is probably the most important app running on it. And because at least for me, the majority of my calls come through WhatsApp. And so I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be arguing with Facebook trying to regulate them. I'm trying to get them to become better partners, to offer all the services that they're offering in North America and offering it here. Now, I know on the other side, why are you going to make the telcos pay? They're paying government fees and spectrum fees and license fees and everything, and these other companies from North America coming in and getting access to the customer, and they don't have to pay anything. But I would go back to what I said before and say, instead of trying to regulate those, ease up on the local carriers so they can be more innovative. And help them to become more innovative. I know at least one carrier, I don't want to call the name, is starting to roll out applications that compete in those markets. So in terms of instant messaging, storage, and those other things, that help them to become more innovative and help them to be able to make a profit on that instead of trying to regulate the other side. Because I think that horse have left the barn, and it's going to be very difficult to do that.
So it's fair to say then that you would want to at least try and make the environment a little bit better for companies, local companies, Caribbean companies, to be more innovative.
Certainly, and then because we want to create innovation in the Caribbean, and as you know, I've always been around innovation in the Caribbean. So instead of trying to regulate WhatsApp as an instant messaging platform, I would rather try to create the environments for the next big instant messaging platform to come out of the Caribbean. Whether it's an investment in the Caribbean, whether it's a foreign operator operating in the Caribbean, but ideally I would want it to be created in the Caribbean. But that's what I would try to do. I try to create the right ecosystem to get those innovations coming out of the Caribbean, then trying to regulate the other ones.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And we also had a follow-up session directly afterwards on contributions made by the digital economy. And you mentioned that your finance minister as well. So I'm sure from a revenue
soon, as of early next week, probably as early as Tuesday, because I think Monday's a holiday.
So I can throw this question at you, and you can think about it for next week. So you're trying to improve revenue, and we've seen in some countries where the big techs were looking at being ways of taxing, getting in revenue into government from a local perspective, because that's been the challenge. Whereas corporate companies such as Cable and Wireless, Telesur, Telem, APUA, they're all paying corporate taxes. They're local companies, and they contribute, whereas there's no contribution from the big tech companies. So one of the sessions, as I said this morning, was looking at that and looking at what can be done in that area. And you're seeing some movement now, certainly in Europe, and Australia won a recent case where they're actually getting contributions from some of these big operators. Is this something that you'll be looking at next week when you're in finance?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Julian, the goals I've set for myself. The Turks and Caicos government. When we talk about Turks and Caicos budget, we talk about normally OPEX in terms of how much the government spends. But in Turks and Caicos, we're not allowed to run a deficit budget. So when I talk about the budget, I'm also talking about the government revenues. And the government, in the best of times, the Turks and Caicos government has collected probably about $320 million in the best year, pre-pandemic years. We're a little bit down now, but we're around about 300. I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to become Minister of Finance next week. My goal is by the end of our term in early 2025 to have grown that 300 plus million, very low 300s to 400 million. And then if we get our second term, taking it to 500 million. And so I've set very lofty goals for myself. So the question comes down to how are we going to do that, and then about the tech sector. I think the way you do it, and particularly looking in the tech sector, I wouldn't text them anymore. Again, I would try to probably text them less, but try to get them to create more innovation in the country, and then try to and I know this is not the specific question you asked, but try to get more big tech to come into country and set up in country. But I think the companies that are in the Caribbean right now, that are in our countries, I think those are the companies we need to focus on. And I wouldn't text them anymore. I would try to give them tax breaks, but have it tied to more innovation. People who are outside of tech don't realize the huge gains countrywide that 5G can bring. But 5G can bring out all sorts of services, but we need to take advantage of that, because with 5G, Internet of Things becomes huge, but we need Internet of Things players in the country. That's a brand new opportunity that we're not looking into. With Internet of Things, particularly cars that are semi-autonomous and soon coming to fully autonomous, we need better maps. Google Maps work very well for telling you how to get to a place, but it doesn't work very well in the Caribbean now. It doesn't work very well for self-driving cars, because you now need pinpoint accuracy, because you don't want it saying that the door is 10 feet away from where it is and the car drives right through the house. So you need much more precision maps. That's a huge opportunity in the Caribbean. So a company in the that sets up in the Caribbean just for mapping, just for taking Google Maps to the level where they are in the United States in terms of the precision, it's a brand new opportunity. And so I would try to create innovation, but I think you create innovation not by taxing more. I think you create innovation by taxing less, and in the car and showing people the opportunities. So that's the way I would approach it. So as a finance minister, I wouldn't go in there trying to up the taxes. I would be working with our partners, particularly in this case, the carriers, about reducing the tax burden on them, but working with them about creating new innovation out of the things that they're going to be rolling out.
I think that's a really good answer. Deputy Premier, I'm looking at the time, and we've actually got just 2 minutes left. So my last question really is a CANTO question, and we're hoping that January next year in 2022, we're hoping that our AGM can actually be a face-to-face one. We've tried these virtual meetings and they're fine, but we'd like to get back to face-to-face meetings. And so there's a little rumor going around that possibly, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but possibly Turks and Caicos might actually be a venue for our AGM next year. What do you think?
Julian, I'm a big fan of CANTO, and I'm not the Minister for Telecommunications. It's Honorable Otis Morris, who's the minister, and I don't like, and I've said it a few times, I don't like to speak on behalf of other ministers, but I will certainly be championing for that. So CANTO can be in Turks and Caicos. I'm hoping that Honorable Mon will put in a word for them to get CANTO to come down into January. It'll probably fall under, if it decides to, it'll probably be pushed by the Telecommunications Commission. They have their own budgets, but if it came down to my vote, and so I would certainly vote for it, and I would push him to do it. I think it's a great thing. I'd love to have it here. We've attempted to have it in the past, and we couldn't. But certainly, if we need to find sponsors for it, the government would work with the Telecommunications Commission in raising the necessary funding to make it viable.
So I'm saying that you're Minister of Finance, so you might be able to put a little budget in there next week for CANTO, but I'm just kidding. No, that sounds quite positive. I think, it'll be to restart or reboot our meeting, so to speak. It will be great to come down to wonderful Turks and Caicos Islands. You've got some amazing venues, and I know you've got the hotels there now. to host. You've got the capacity to hold the AGM. So we'll continue to talk. Deputy Premier, it's been great catching up with you, and continue to do good. Look after yourself and take care.
Thank you very much. Same to you, Julian. Take care.
All
the best to all the members of CANTO.